In the year 1830, a massive but fractured nation struggled to find its footing. Although Mexico had won its independence from Spain in 1821 after a grueling decade-long revolution, the young republic was in total chaos. Looking at the map of that era, Mexico was vastly larger than it is today, stretching across a massive 4.5 million square kilometers as one of the largest countries in the world. However, 11 years of war had left the nation in dire straits. The revolutionaries had established no clear plans or guidelines for governance, sparking intense internal struggles for political control. Compounding this, the government suffered a complete lack of funds, faced emerging internal rebellions, and lived under the constant threat of a Spanish invasion from nearby Cuba. This chronic instability left Mexico completely ill-prepared for international conflict when war broke out just 2 decades later. Meanwhile, the neighboring United States was experiencing a period of rapid expansion. Far larger than it was at its independence, the U.S. had pushed deep into Native American territories and acquired the vast Louisiana Territory from France. Yet the American government saw an opportunity for even more growth. Mexico's internal instability had caused several of its northern regions to rebel, leading to Texas gaining its independence from Mexico in 1836. Initially, the United States declined to incorporate Texas into the Union, largely because northern political interests fiercely opposed adding a new slave state. Furthermore, the Mexican government, which still considered Texas a rebellious province, warned that any attempt at annexation would lead directly to war. The political landscape shifted dramatically with the 1844 election of U.S. President James K. Polk. Polk campaigned heavily on the promise that Texas should be re-annexed and that the United States should firmly claim the Oregon Territory. Crucially, Polk also had his eyes on California, New Mexico, and the rest of what is today the American Southwest. Seeking to expand the nation from coast to coast, Polk offered to purchase these lands from Mexico. The Mexican government flatly rejected the offer. In response, Polk instigated a conflict by moving American troops into a heavily disputed zone between the Rio Grande and the Nueces River, a region that both countries had previously recognized as part of the Mexican state of Coahuila. Tensions reached a boiling point when Mexican forces attacked an American detachment under the command of General Zachary Taylor within the disputed zone, killing about a dozen Americans. The Mexican forces then laid siege to an American fort along the Rio Grande. General Taylor quickly called in reinforcements and successfully defeated the Mexican forces at the battles of Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma. Following these engagements, President Polk announced to Congress that American blood had been shed upon American soil. On May 13, 1846, the U.S. Congress officially declared war. While the United States marched to war, the internal situation in Mexico grew even more complicated with the return of Antonio López de Santa Anna, a deeply controversial figure. Santa Anna had a history of shifting alliances, serving 12 non-consecutive presidential terms over 22 years. While in exile in Cuba, he wrote to leaders in Mexico City claiming he only wished to use his military experience to help his homeland reclaim Texas. Desperate, the Mexican government allowed him to return. What they did not know was that Santa Anna had been secretly negotiating with U.S. representatives, promising to sell the contested territories at a reasonable price if the U.S. Navy allowed him to pass through their blockades. Once he set foot in Mexico and took command of the army, Santa Anna broke his word to the Americans, declared himself president, and prepared to fight the invasion. The American strategy immediately targeted Mexico's northern territories. General Stephen Watts Kearny led his Army of the West into New Mexico. Encountering no Mexican forces, Kearny entered Santa Fe on August 15, 1846, and claimed the entire territory for the United States without firing a single shot. Kearny established a civilian government and a temporary legal system before marching toward California. Concurrently, the U.S. Navy's Pacific Squadron worked to seize California's ports, aided by Captain John C. Fremont and a force of American volunteers. By January 1847, the combined forces of Commodore Robert F. Stockton and General Kearny defeated Mexican resistance in California, securing the region through the Treaty of Cahuenga. With the North largely under American control, the focus shifted to the Mexican heartland. General Zachary Taylor's army pushed south across the Rio Grande, fighting a brutal urban battle to capture Monterrey. Recognizing his success, Santa Anna personally marched north with a massive force to crush Taylor. The two armies clashed at the mountain pass of Buena Vista in February 1847. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Taylor's forces held their lines, using highly effective artillery to inflict severe casualties on the Mexican troops. Rather than continuing the assault the next day, Santa Anna abruptly retreated south after receiving news of a rebellion breaking out in Mexico City. To bring a decisive end to the war, President Polk altered his strategy, shifting reinforcements away from Taylor to launch a massive amphibious invasion. Under the command of General Winfield Scott, the U.S. military executed the first major amphibious landing in American history at the crucial port city of Veracruz. After a heavy artillery bombardment, Veracruz surrendered. General Scott then began a dramatic 50 miles westward toward the capital. Santa Anna attempted to block the advance at the mountain pass of Cerro Gordo, entrenching 12,000 troops and positioning artillery along the main road. However, American scouts discovered the hidden positions, allowing Scott's forces to outflank and defeat the Mexican army. By late summer, General Scott's army reached the outskirts of Mexico City. A series of intense battles followed, including the battles of Contreras, Churubusco, Molino del Rey, and the storming of the historic Chapultepec Tassel. Mexican resistance suffered terribly from a severe desertion problem. Most of the Mexican soldiers were poor peasants who felt deep loyalty to their families and villages, but none to the corrupt generals who had conscripted them. Often hungry, under-equipped, and held in contempt by their own officers, they had little motivation to fight. On September 14, 1847, American troops successfully breached the city gates and occupied Mexico City. With the capital captured, the United States faced a new political dilemma: whether to annex the entirety of Mexico. Ultimately, American leaders rejected total annexation due to stark cultural differences and the severe political instability it would create. Instead, the war officially ended with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Under the agreement, Mexico ceded over 900,000 square miles of territory to the United States, including Alta California, Nuevo Mexico, and all claims to Texas, establishing the foundation of the modern American Southwest. In return, Mexico paid $15 million, a remarkably low sum driven by the fact that these northern lands were sparsely populated. Years later, the Gadsden Purchase would finalize the remaining borderline, permanently reshaping the geography and history of both North American nations.